Welcome everyone to the Legends and Lectures podcast. Today, very special guest, as opposed to the other very special guest today, is a Subarashi guest, the one and only Dr. Wes Robertson. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you
Uh,
very much for having me. It's a delight.
for those who don't know, first of all, I am a giant weeb, as you can probably tell. But we also talk about like the linguistics of video games on my channel too. So this is in the same realm. We all like linguistics and etymology on this program in general. Dr. West, will you please introduce your work for people who don't know you?
Yeah, so my name is Wes Robertson, and I am a sociolinguist of Japanese. I'm a senior lecturer here at Macquarie University in Sydney, Australia. That's, I guess, in American terms, you call that just a professor. We go by a different system. I am also chair of the discipline of global cultures and languages here in the School of International Studies. And my work has historically focused on variation in the ways that Japanese people write Japanese. Although lately it's been expanding more to look at the role of language in Japanese subcultures and how language plays a key role in how global subcultures manifest on like local levels. In particular, I've been doing projects on how the global metal scene manifests in various Asian Pacific contexts and how that affects the way that people use language in their day-to-day life, fans use language, and then how that affects just the language around them from the people that aren't involved, looking at these kind of complex processes that go beyond borders. I'm very interested broadly in basically how people use language and why. And in the Japanese context, I'm very fascinated with just Japanese itself as a language, but I try in all my work to make it clear that we study Japan to learn about things that are beyond just Japan, rather than obviously Japan's interesting in and of itself, but using Japan as a way to go beyond some of the flaws or the misunderstandings that come about when we only analyze, for instance, European context, European languages, and then try to apply that to broad statements that are supposed to apply to humans around the world. So I guess that's my little spiel. That's what I try to do. And yeah, I also teach Japanese and make sure that the people that are under me in my discipline are, happy to come to work and that things stay running. Yeah.
So, can you tell people, for those who don't know, about your magical TikTok channel?
Yeah, so I'm not sure how magical it is. It's more unfortunate, I think, but basically, I've always kind of been frustrated with academia's ivory tower syndrome, and it's not something we can really avoid in that peer review, et cetera, what funds and justifies the research we do, the fact that it's reviewed by other people that are experts and critiqued, and it goes to all that. It involves these processes that mean that a lot of what we do is shut off behind paywalls and expensive um, databases that you can't really access if you don't have a university account or if you're not a student, et cetera. And so we do all this work, but people don't really benefit from it. And especially, there's the issue that a lot of, like in Australia, a lot of universities are public. So, there's this, how are we showing off what we're doing with that kind of funding is something I think is really important. And I have some colleagues as well that are very passionate about this and a desire to kind of, we still have to do our job, publish research that has these kind of walls on them based on how peer review works. And I don't have the power to overturn, the entire academic publishing industry. But I was inspired by colleagues to try to focus some of my work on things that are accessible, even if it's a bit, I guess, sillier. And I have to do that within the time I have. If I use my time where I'm supposed to be doing peer review research to do TikTok videos, my job's not going to last very long. But trying to figure out content that can be used to help people and be passionate about Japanese, people without the resources even to go to university to develop their skills in Japanese, or people who are post-university. And also, I was all inspired by the fact that I applied for a grant, which is like something that just like asking for money to do projects, that the money pays for the th projects or pays for teaching, things like that. And it was a media-based project. It was rejected. And so I kind of was like, all right, well, I'll just do it myself then.
Hmm.
And the project was better. It was bigger scale. It involved people that aren't just me. But I had a friend doing some TikTok and like, just talking to the camera. So I was like, all right, why not? And I've been doing part of this outreach that I'm talking about was I have a blog, which is like my main hub of stuff. And one of the features of that blog is that every month I did really deep dives into 10 Japanese slang words, be they new, be they old, just words that were interesting to me that couldn't find a dictionary. And so for, the unwashed illiterate masses, I decided to take that content and turn it into video form to just see how it would go. And I did it with a caveat that if I don't find it fun and if no one likes it, I'll just stop. I'm very blessed that I have a full-time job that so I don't have to worry about like the algorithm. I don't have to worry about this being successful or being funded or anything like that. But I can record a video after work when I'm zoning out before I go to bed. I can do some editing, and then every few days I can pop it out, and that fits within my schedule, fits within my workload. And fortunately, people have vibed with it. I kind of went in blind. I didn't really check like what's out there in the Japanese content sphere. What I've seen isn't really for me. It's aimed at younger people. It's aimed at people that are just starting. Um, so I wasn't even sure if I was overlapping with anything, but fortunately, and hopefully evidencing the value of a PhD, it seems to be, unique and different. And yeah, it's a little silly. But combined with that kind of TikTok outreach, with the stuff on my blog that is like actual textbooks and like learning materials and stuff like that, it's slow because it's all after work, but hopefully it does, you know, way back when I started learning Japanese, the internet was still much newer.
Mhm.
But there were people out there putting out free Japanese materials, and I always found them very, very useful. And I appreciated that they were free. And if I can pay that forward a little bit, even if it's, I don't know who needs to ever know some of the words I cover on those videos, but if it makes them think Japanese is fun, and if it inspires their passion for Japanese, and if it, I don't know, helps them in that way at all. And leads them to the actual textbooks and stuff I produce, which I, you know, think I'm a little bit more proud of in the traditional sense. Then that'd be great. I'd love to know that somebody gets, eventually achieves their Japanese goals, and part of it was being motivated by fun, free stuff that keeps them interested in the language. That'd be fantastic. I guess that's too long of an answer, but that's what
Oh,
the YouTube channel's.
that's great though, because I actually have your textbok and I downloaded it before I went to Japan, and I did use it because I'm always on the hunt for. I have so many, as always, for all linguistics learners, for all
Mm.
language learners. We always have millions of textbooks, and some of them work and some of them don't. And I have
Yeah.
so many of them that don't work. And so I wanted to ask you, what inspired you to write your own free Japanese textbook, which is on Dr. Wes's website, free Japanese textbook. So what did inspire you to write one?
Well, that was kind of a crazy little happenstance. So I talked about the ivory tower and all that, but this was actually more. There was no intent initially. Basically, I got hired here, and when I arrived, I was like, "What textbook do we use?" And they said, "We don't have a textbook.
Oh no.
We have these homemade materials." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that's kind of cool." And I looked at them, and I mean, it's been 8+ years, so I guess I can speak honestly. I wasn't that impressed. They weren't bad. It wasn't like the students were being, deceived or anything like that. But I was like, I can do better. But first, my initial response was actually, can we buy a textbook? Like I asked the head of Japanese at the time, like, can we please buy a textbook? The students want a textbook. I see them buying, like students were buying Genki. My first year, I was like, I'll just run with it. Like I'll run with what's here and see how it goes. I'll improve things that need immediate fixing, but I'll trust that, this has been running for a while and I'm new. I'll do that. But I saw students like buying Genki and bringing it to class. And it's like, oh, geez, that's unfortunate. And, like Genki's, that's not a shade against Genki. It's just like,
Yeah, Genki's fine, but
if
it serves a
yeah,
purpose. Yeah.
right. If our materials aren't good enough that if our materials aren't at a level that students can't exist with just them, if they have to go out and buy other materials, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Um, and so I tried to push for us to buy a textbook, and I was told no. So I said, okay, can I make one then? And they said, yeah, probably thinking that I wouldn't. And I did. And it was awful. But like it was a huge undertaking. Like I just sat, I was like, okay, I'm gonna make a textbook then. I'm gonna make a textbook. And I referenced Genki, I referenced Nakama, which is what I used when I was in first year uni. I referenced all these textbooks to make sure that we were covering the right content. I made sure to add things that I thought were missing from those textbooks. I had to coordinate with the people at the higher levels who were encouraging about to make sure we didn't have overlap between what they were doing, right? And to make sure our vocab lists. And the first version of the textbook, I don't know if anyone still has a copy out there. I'm not like super proud of it. But I did notice that students were no longer buying Genki, right? It solved that problem. And it was free for our students. So it saved them money, which I was happy with. I wanted them to not spend extra cash, and it solved the initial issue. And then, but there was a lot missing. There's a lot that was flawed. There were typos because like I had to rush the thing out over a few months. And this I did do at work, like because this was work for the university. This is like the TikToks. Um, and yeah, there are a number of things like explanations that I am not proud of. There were some errors which are of course incredibly embarrassing.
It
But
happens.
it happens. And fortunately, I passed probation and stayed around so I could update it year to year to year. And we gradually added things like we improved the quality of the work. The initial workbook was very translation heavy, and now we improved it to be more interesting, hopefully as interesting as assignments can go. Uh, After a few years, when I finally had time to like, because I put out the big fires, we sat down and made like culture notes about, little things about Japanese history, Japanese culture, Japanese linguistics, etc., to flesh things out, which aren't like assessed or anything, but textbooks have them. I like them. We slowly built in dialogues that are now there, and for students, this is one of the few things in the textbook that is not available to people that aren't Macquarie students. But we got recordings of the dialogues with native speakers and put them onto our like website for the class, so that students would have access to these audio files that we created, we curated, and we made sure that they were matching, the grammar and the vocab. And so slowly, year to year to year, it finally built into something I was proud enough of to like maybe show to the world. And I asked the university, like, can I release this under Creative Commons? And they said, yeah, sure. And so there were two of those, Japanese 1 and Japanese 2. And I got a message from somebody who said that, hey, I used these textbooks and they were really great. When's the intermediate one coming out? And I was like, never. I don't
Oh
teach intermediate
no.
Japanese. But that person like put a seed in my brain, right? It was like, well, I've already done two textbooks. Why don't I write an intermediate textbook? And so I did.
Oh
But
no.
that was so, but that actually was like, again, a lot of the stuff I'm talking about, this ivory tower, like outside of stuff, this is stuff I have to do outside of work because while my university is very happy that I'm doing it, it's not my 9 to 5. So while the first textbooks were like months of really intense work, this was like 30 minutes here before I go to bed, an hour here on a Saturday while I'm having a coffee, like this and that. So it took around 2 years to complete. But that's been released too, and I'm very proud of that just in terms of the scope of it. That one doesn't have the culture notes, it doesn't have the model dialogues. I found some typos in it already that I need to fix, but like it's I don't know if that one's ever gonna be perfect because I can't battle test it in class. Like the level 1, level 2 have been field tested with like student responses, like, things at the end of the year say, I loved this, or like I didn't like this, or where I'm explaining something in class, I'm like, oh, that doesn't work. That's a bad explanation. I can't do that with the third one, but it's there, and it was a massive undertaking. And I'm, given that it's free, I figure that people can people can send complaints about any typos or errors in the level 3 textbook to the same place that they sent the money to buy it. Um, and yeah, maybe one day, I don't know, maybe one day that'll lead to an N3 level book as I do more here and there. But at the moment, any plans for anything of that scale are kind of not feasible just on the fact that I've got this TikTok stuff and then the blog and smaller projects like I released an N5 kanji practice book last year and I'm building the N4 version of that. And again, it's just like, 10 minutes here, 20 minutes there. But I have, a family and like a life, and I like to get some sleep here and
You,
there.
you don't
So
need a life. You have
I don't need a
Japanese.
life. No,
You
I
have language.
have to balance my desire to give back and to support the Japanese learning community with my desire to not just die of exhaustion in my 30s. So
But that would
it's
be very Japanese if you did.
I don't know about, I don't, yeah,
I don't know if we're going to
Well,
talk
they're
about
doing their
Karoshi,
best,
but
Yeah, they're doing their best. There's plenty of exploitation of workers outside of Japan.
as we know. I was
Yeah,
actually gonna, I was actually
yeah,
to
sorry.
ask,
I
will
find this
you?
more like I used to play video games in my spare time and stuff to relax, and I honestly find this stuff more fun. So that's kind of why I'm doing it, and I'll keep doing it as long as it's fun, and if it helps people, that's great.
Great. So if I ask you to write your slang dictionary in physical form, will you do it?
That would if that would require money. Like I've considered um turning the dictionary into a book. The question is, one, it'd have to be more interesting than the dictionary because why would anyone buy it if it exists online? And that's possible, but I would need a publisher who's willing to do that. If they're listening, I'm open.
Macmillan, get on it. I want
Macmillan,
this
yeah, no,
book.
it's possible. It's been in the back of my mind if I could turn some of this, slang stuff into a book on Japanese slang, etc. If I can, if I can convince the university that it's a worthwhile research project, even though it's a non-traditional one, then that makes it easier. But eventually, yeah, that'd be cool. And that would be something that would need, I would need the support of a publisher, an editor, etc. So that would have to be, a paid project. But if there's demand out there for it, it'd be a
I'm the
blast to get.
demand. I am
You're
demanding
the
that you
demand?
write.
I think we need to secure more than one confirmed buyer, but that's the start. It starts with one, right?
You could, if I could put money through the screen here, here's my $20. I will pre-fund that project. Actually, I think you'd do really well as a Kickstarter if you actually had somebody, an editor, and then you had, let's say, somebody to do the art. I think that would do very well as a Kickstarter. I think you'd do amazingly, especially with the amount of people that you have on the Scripting Japan channel. I think if you did a poll on YouTube and you asked them if they wanted it or if they would support it, I think you'd be surprised to find how many people would. I mean, I would love for more people to know, like Get Wild Tykeing and Day Two.
Yeah, that was a great. I love that one. That was great.
Yeah, that the Get Wild Tykeing is amazing. I love that one. The Day Two one made me laugh when I read it. Would you like to explain to people what these two things are?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so all this, like, no matter how much support, none of this would be possible unless the university tells me it's a research project so I can work on it at work, because just time-wise. But for
Mm.
those two terms, Get Wild Tykeing is a song that people say makes you hyped if you listen to it like the minute you leave work. And I can see why. It's from it's from a band, but it got famous through an anime called City Hunter as the exit credits. And City Hunter is like a kind of, I think I described it as a cool guys don't look at explosions kind of show. So when you do
Yeah.
work that, it feels like you have a cool guys don't look at explosions kind of job. And then day two is a weird one. You've clearly dived into the blog a bit because I haven't made a video on that. I don't even know if it, I think like when I looked it up, I couldn't find proof that it necessarily existed, but
Oh
it's
no.
supposedly, well, it exists because like they've clearly talked about it, but I couldn't find people using it naturally online,
Hmm.
right? Which is fine, because the people that used it, like Gyaru, they're maybe not tweeting about it. But if the Gyaru magazines and stuff are talking about it, then I trust them. But it refers to the second day of like going without bathing, not because you're a filthy, disgusting, human being, but because you've been too busy like doing fun stuff. So like if you've been out, gathering it up, I guess,
Hmm.
and there's been so much that you haven't had time to uh, get clean for a few days, that would be called day two,
I
which
love
is
that one.
written in romanization, but obviously not pronounced like I do. Uh,
Day
and yeah,
two, I guess.
that's a weird one. Like I still am looking for if I ever make a video on it, I'll have to go back and actually find evidence of it because um, it was asserted online in Japanese that it exists, but I people aren't tweeting about it. So, maybe it's just between your friends.
What was it? Was it specifically for like was it the like Reiwa Gyaru who are doing it now, or was it a little bit earlier? Was it like 10 years ago?
No, no, it was listed as a recent one. It was listed as like a recent young kids term for like, obviously not like, 15, 16, but, people that go out clubbing and partying and stuff like that. It was listed as, Gyaru are back. There's Egg is back. Egg has a big YouTube and TikTok presence. They're reviving the whole, Gyaru vibe and
We need
introducing
fruits
new
back.
skin
We need
tones.
fruits.
Yeah, yeah. So they said Day Two exists, and they certainly know more than I do about the Gyaru scene. But they're not. No one's seemed to be tweeting about it. But that's fine. I don't think Gyarus are that interested in Twitter in 2025. I think they have their own.
They have their own
And the problem
stuff.
is if TikTok had uh, an ability to like search videos by words said in the video,
Yeah, it
that'd be
doesn't.
crazy. That would open up like it'd be like the creation of a new Library of Alexandria for linguistic research, but
Yeah,
they don't obviously have that. So unfortunately, Twitter remains one of the best like databases of modern language use. But if there was some way like if TikTok introduced, they'd have to do it just out of goodwill, which would be incredible. But if they even using their automatic transcription service, which is highly flawed, uh, if they had like a back end of that, of those just audio transcriptions, automatic ones, and that you could search via text terms, oh my God, it would be insane how much we could
I
learn.
know
It would
you
be
can do that on
incredible.
YouTube.
Can
But
you?
yes, but there are certain ways to do it. You have to search via. You have to make sure one that the video has the CC actually on.
Mm,
And sometimes they don't. All of our videos do, so people can probably because I know that Google now has an AI summary thing, which will go through all of the text in the videos, and then it creates transcripts and summaries off that. Do I approve if they're using AI without people's permission? No, I do not. But if this is a language tool that people
mm,
can actually use, like you say, to search things, and with podcasts, especially if it's up on Acast, you can search through all the podcasts via the automatic transcript. Is the automatic transcript perfect? No, as you say,
no,
but you can still search it. And so that is something that you can do. You do
that's
have
really
to,
cool.
yeah, you
But
do have
the
to
issue is
set
like YouTube.
certain parameters you have to set on Google in order to
Mm,
do that. But yes, you can search via video, but you will have to put in, brackets, commas, follow plus
mm,
signs, follow their formula
right.
of how to search for that specific topic.
And YouTube and like podcasts are kind of they're like the novels of the video scene. I don't know if that makes sense, but like
Yes.
it's very non-spontaneous. And the benefit of something like TikTok, or I guess if Twitch could do this as well, maybe, is that a lot of what is said is, YouTube has shorts now, but a lot of the TikTok videos are very, there's plenty of scripted stuff, but there's lots of just like I'm in front of the camera and I'm going to say some stuff and you're going to like it because I'm popular and you like liking looking at me. Um, so that kind of, especially for stuff like slang, like there are obviously videos where maybe I could search for day two or something like that, but I'm guessing the amount of times it's been said on like TikTok is much higher than YouTube just based on what kind of conversations are being had there. But I'll never know because that tool kind of doesn't exist.
Yet.
But
Yeah.
having people upload just stuff like just talking naturally in their own dialects, in their own idiolects, is a huge, huge boon for the kind of work that people like me do. And when the tools are there to actually access it and analyze it, they can do a lot of fun stuff. And especially, fortunately, it doesn't have the issue of like observer bias. We can always give people a microphone and ask them to record, but while they do eventually get used to it, they're aware the microphone is there. And you have to meet people, and the kind of people that will contribute to a study are not always representative of like a wider swath of population. So there's a lot of potential here, but obviously TikTok's interest is not primarily in funding and supporting language research. They have other initiatives and goals.
It should
But if
be.
they,
Their AI is
that'd be
listening
great.
to our videos.
Yeah, that'd be great. I would appreciate it. It'd be a fascinating tool because it is really cool to see. Uh, there are obviously tons of problems with social media, but the democratization of like voice in a way, and not just like who's speaking, but how they're speaking. Uh, there's there's been some of that in Britain, for instance. The BBC now is very different from what it was
Yeah.
when it used to be all royal, received pronunciation, and now you can hear a wide variety of British voices, but I'd still say they're middle to upper class voices, and sounds. And I think it's unfortunate that Japan is like Britain, like the United Kingdom, a island that has a shockingly high range of dialects and pronunciation styles. But on the NHK, you hear what I basically call like a fictional pronunciation. Like I have a over there somewhere a dictionary for the NHK, and the pitch accent that you have to learn to be an NHK pronouncer does not actually reflect an
Wow.
extant variety of Japanese. It's distinct from Hyojungo, Tokyo dialect that we all learn in class.
Hmm.
It's a artificial announcer dialect, and it's fine, of course. It's a good thing for a country to have a language variety that everyone in the country can use to communicate with each other. That's not like a problem. But it is unfortunate that Japan has kind of a history that, of course, the United Kingdom, et cetera, had as well of not featuring the variety of linguistic content that exists in the country in a way that legitimizes it. Like, Osaka, Kansai, et cetera,
Hmm.
they get relegated to variety shows, but they're
Hmm.
not allowed to be used by TV announcers, et cetera. Tohoku dialect, et cetera, still is treated as like the hick,
Hmm.
variety
Yeah,
unfairly.
it's Suguru accent.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's too bad. I wish that Japan's obviously made great strides. It's nothing like in World War II, when they had like the Hogan Fuda and stuff like that, and were punishing people for speaking dialects in schools and whatnot. Kind of a legacy of the style of nationalism that was imported from Western dialogues about like country and language. But it would I hope that in my lifetime I do see the vast variety of Japanese elevated a bit and appreciated a bit more on a way that shows institutional backing because there is a huge amount of different ways of speaking Japanese, and with my attention to slang, etc., it's my little attempt at contributing to that a little bit because I'm not a dialect specialist at all. I primarily speak standard Japanese. I know a little bit of Kansai Ben, like, but just wakara hen, like there you go, a few words here and there. And dialects aren't my specialty, but recording and recognizing this stuff as legitimate, slang terms as legitimate varieties of Japanese. And in my videos, in my blog, I try to do edutainment. I try to be fun with it. I try to make people laugh, but I also try to present it seriously as like this is a term that deserves attention as a legitimate term, as a legitimate variety. It is something that I view as very important, and I would like to. I hope that in my lifetime I will see people from Kansai, people from Hokkaido, people from Tohoku, people from all regions of Japan on the news, giving the news in a way that reflects their background and celebrates that.
What about
Because
local news channels? Do they not do it in their own dialect if it's local news?
I'm not sure, actually. I don't watch a lot of local Japanese news. I don't have a lot of access. I imagine that local channels do, but the NHK, like the official national
Hmm.
announcers, do have this style. And there are times when the vibe of the show is more relaxed and they're allowed to kind of, bring things in. But when they announce, they're expected to use this kind of practiced form. And yeah, if you like, again, you go to the BBC, you'll hear somebody from anywhere, you'll hear Scottish English and, Irish inflected English reading the national news. And you wouldn't hear that in Japan. And it'd be nice to see. Not, it has to be, again, understandable to the country. It's supposed to communicate things to the nation, right? It's national news, but it doesn't have to all sound the exact same. And the more that these dialects and these varieties are featured, the more that people can get used to them and uh, understand them as forms. Because you see people, a lot of features from Osaka, etc., have spread across the nation because they're used by people that are popular, but they never get to break through into that kind of certified by the Japanese government as an acceptable formal variety level yet. But
Interesting.
again, we're
Well,
getting there. I'm optimistic.
In Osaka,
Mm.
because just like you say, Kansai is so popular, especially in the rap scene. There are so
Mm.
many who use Kansai for rap. I mean, obviously Osaka is like the rap capital of Japan, but I think maybe that's why it permeates a bit. I remember during the pandemic, there was a project that was done. I don't remember what government took it up, but it was to do radio taiso, the early morning exercises
Mm.
for those who don't know what they are. Um, in everybody's dialect. And
Oh.
so Tohoku did one for the Tsukudu region, and it's still on YouTube. And you can hear them just counting in their
Mhm.
dialect, and it sounds like it sounds like it sounds like Uchi no Gucci. It sounds like a completely different language entirely,
Mhm.
but just because their dialect is so different. I think people get hung up a lot about slang, and I, like you, do agree that it can be really a good cultural bridge. and a language learning tool. Because what's the first thing that everybody wants to know the second that they learn a new language? Bad words or new fun words. So there was a wonderful book that featured on abroad in Japan called Tadashi Fuck no Tsukaikata. And I
Oh
don't
yeah, yeah, I have that.
I love that book. It's amazing. There's also a sequel
Oh,
called Tadashi Bitch no Tsukaikata, which I think is very funny. But you can see when people use it, and I sometimes, when my students in the academy that I work for, they'll ask me, what does this mean? How do I use this? Because our swear words and how they work do not operate the same way in Japanese. There are some that do, like so if you could say like "kuso oishi," like "oh, it's so shitting good."
yeah.
That kind of works. But for a lot of our swear words, it doesn't work the same way that it does in Japanese. So they'll ask me questions about how to use certain words, but there's that cultural exchange. There's that language exchange of
Mm,
where two people who speak languages that are on opposite sides of the language spectrum can actually come together and share something. And
mm.
they use our swear words, and we use some of their swear words also
Yeah.
without realizing it. Um,
I mean, I'm not the I actually have problems with that book. I not to
oh,
throw water on things or make enemies on the podcast, but
I didn't write that
honestly,
book, so it's fine.
no, no, no. It's okay. But my problem with that book is that it does what a lot of slang explanations do, and that is I feel it doesn't take it seriously. It tries to make it if you look through the book, it's a lot of example sentences.
Hmm.
Like here's an example sentence, here's an example sentence. But there's no actual like explanation of kind of the grammar of
It's
it.
true.
It it doesn't it doesn't investigate it from a way that makes you think that this is a word that needs to be treated with respect and kind of interest. And that's a very me as an academic perspective. The book sold like, gangbusters. So a lot of Japanese people are very happy with it. I'm sure that they learn from it. But I still haven't seen like a guide in Japanese to English swearing that treats the learner like a student of English rather than someone that will read the book and then forget the content. It's sort of it's the commodification of slang as disposable content still. And that's again not a problem necessarily. Like books that people pay money for and read and are happy with and enjoyed reading is a functional transaction. But if you're a Japanese person and you want to know how to swear in English because it is something that you basically are required to know to become fluent in English, like if you want to watch English movies,
Hmm.
read English books, you need to understand how swearing works. I have not seen a good guide yet, and I'd like to. That'd be great. But that book doesn't scratch that, doesn't fill that hole, in my opinion.
So
It's very
when are we
much
getting yours?
I, I think I don't think I should write it. I don't I'd be happy to be like no, I'm honest. I'm not in English. I'm not a linguist of English, and I'm not a specialist in Japanese people learning English. I'd be happy to like work with somebody on something like that, but it should be written by a Japanese person, a Japanese expert in English who has a similar approach. And I think maybe those people are out there. It just requires again someone to fund the person's time to do it. But yeah, that would be for Japanese people, so it should be someone who's an expert in in English language learning, which is I've taught English, but it's not my job, it's not my interest.
Don't put that on me, Dr. West. I have too many
Yeah, you got to do it.
books.
That's right. You teach
No,
English, so
I
maybe
have
you
two,
should do
yes, I do, but I have too many too many projects going on at the same time. And I, like you,
it.
don't get paid for TikTok or running podcasts. So if somebody would like
Mhm.
to fund that, Dr. West and I will consider it if there is the
If you get a
money.
Japanese person involved too,
Oh,
that'd be
absolutely. I have five I can contact
okay. Okay,
if there's money, they'll jump at the drop of the hat for sure. So speaking of which, we do have some questions from all over the world
sure.
that
Sounds
people
great.
would like to ask you about linguistics in Japanese.
Mhm.
So you can take as long as you want to answer these, but some of these questions are short, some of these are a little longer. So we start off with a short question. Can you explain how the word cho came to mean super good?
No. I don't know. So I can guess for you.
Hmm.
Like Cho in has that kind of meaning of extreme to it in just its normal use. So my guess is it was just kind of an extension. Like if you look at the kanji, it has uses of that have not been considered slang. So just taking it from kanji compounds and applying it to like adjectives and stuff like that was I guess a logical step is the wrong word, but a fairly, understandable step. Japanese people do like to, I mean, not Japanese people, people everywhere like to play with language. And when you have kanji, you can do fun things by taking, you know, these kanji that represent often a meaning and then ripping them out of words and applying them elsewhere. It's like holic, in
Mm-hmm.
English, like we had
Yes.
alcoholic, which was alcohol and ick. And as I'm sure you as an etymology person know, that resulted in holic, which was not originally anything
Yes.
becoming applied,
Yeah.
right, to chocoholic, et cetera. Because it's which means that we have to revisit it. Like when someone who's born this year, whatever, first encounters the word alcoholic, they may parse it in their brain as
Holic.
alcoholic, right? They might
Right.
they might make their own etymology of it, and that's fine. It's words don't actually there aren't actual any rules to language. It's etymologies. The how you parse a word is arbitrary to some extent. So this kind of play when people look at a word and break it apart however they want and then use those new parts. That's something that exists in any word. So cho moving from kanji compounds to something you can put in front of an adjective reflects something that I'd say is not limited to Japanese at all. But I don't know the exact like history of when that happened. But it's getting to the point where that's beyond slang from just something that exists. Like you have to know that to be fluent in Japanese in 2025. It's like, yabai,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. Zen positive. Those things are not small, localized anymore. They're stuff that I think should be in textbooks to some extent because you hear them so much.
Mechakucha
Uh,
also. That
yeah,
exploded. Yeah.
Mechakucha has been around for a while, but
Mm.
having it the range that it is used for has gone up and up and up and up and up. Like some of this stuff has been around from the 80s, some of it's been around for hundreds of years, but people moving it into these new realms, and it happens faster now. None of
Mm-hmm.
this stuff is new. None of this stuff is new in terms of the fundamentals of what's going on, but the speed and the fact that you know someone in Canada and someone in Australia are chatting about it, like that would not have happened if 200 years ago. It can be observed and it can move because of again things like TikTok, things like national media, just more mobilization of people. People communicate so much more than they used to. Like, and especially people worry about writing and reading and literacy. And there's some things to worry about there, but people write nowadays way more than they used to, right? And they're trying to write in a style that reflects how they speak, and that takes these dialectical forms that may have never been observed outside of a town and potentially launches them onto a national scale. Yeah.
Next
All my
question.
answers are too long.
Oh,
I'm sorry about that.
no, 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 no. You have 2 hours. You can fill up that time however you want. Um, Next question. So, can you explain how the Japanese alphabet came to be with its several writing systems? Do you see a shift and a move away from kanji? And I just want to point this out because you did a video on this recently, where you were talking about how katakana is now used for Japanese words. And so I noticed this. For those who are only listening, I'm holding up Famitsu magazine. And I noticed this right after Dr. West put up his video about this, where it says mezurashi, but it says it in
Mhm.
katakana.
Mhm.
And I thought, what's the purpose of this? Like, it's not marketing anything. They just decided to put mezurashi in katakana, and that's it. It
Mhm.
says gemu no mezurashi. And so I don't know. I get why they didn't write that in its usual form. I think
It
is
could It
interesting.
could be anything, yeah. The number one guess would be emphasis, but it depends on the context. You have to see, you have to ask the person who wrote it in some cases. But yeah, the Japanese writing system. Basically, it's important to remember that the Japanese writing system that we all use and assume is normal is less than 100 years old. Like, and arguably less than 50 from some perspectives, but depending on what you consider reform. Basically, nothing that we assume is normal was normal over 100 years ago. The After World War II, there was a reform which resulted in most of the norms we use today, and there have been more reforms since then. So you say, Japanese words being written in katakana. Well, Japanese words were written in katakana for like 1,000 plus years.
Hmm.
It's now interesting because we expect that they won't be, but that's a new expectation. That is, there are Japanese people who are alive who may have been born at a time where that was not expected. So basically, the history of the Japanese language, there are books behind me that everyone should access. But obviously Japanese started with no writing system. And then sometime around, things differ, we're not sure, but 4, 5, 600 AD, Chinese was introduced, or a form of what we now consider Chinese was introduced. Chinese characters were introduced, and they were introduced either through China or through Korea. And initially, it was introduced not as a way to communicate, but just like gifts that had stuff on them, right? The oldest stuff we have, we think, are gifts, like swords, some coins, things like that. And we don't know if the people that got them would have been able to read them, although sometimes they do have phonetic use of Chinese characters to spell Japanese names and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But that would have been the Chinese people writing them, right? Or the people in Korea. So that situation lasted for a while, but Japanese people very quickly did become literate in forms of writing that are based in forms of Chinese, and especially classical Chinese. So they were writing Japanese in Chinese, basically, or oftentimes they were just writing Chinese. It's like a lot of the first people that were literate in, what is now the United Kingdom were not literate in English, they were literate in French, right?
Oh yes, that's
Yeah.
true.
They have those kind of, you don't actually, you learn a different language to become literate because there's nothing written in your own language. Uh, but over time, Japanese people developed a number of ways of writing Japanese, or at least like Chinese influenced Japanese. And these were mainly very, very wealthy people. Like literacy around the entire island system, the entire, archipelago was low, obviously. But scholars were working on it. And they very interestingly, and for some reason, this like did not happen to the same extent in Korea or Vietnam or other places that were using Chinese characters at the time, or systems based on them. Someone was just like, "Hey, why don't I use this character that means water to write our word for water, and just say that?" And that exploded basically the use of it, and you eventually developed a number of systems for writing Japanese in Chinese characters, and these systems are like a mess. They're not nice. There were multiple of them. They involved a number of diacritics, like including marks, where you had to reorganize the order of the sentence. Like the sentence was written in a Chinese order, and then there were marks telling you how to like reorganize it in Japanese. There were things like conjugation that was just kind of like missing, and you had to figure it out from context. But they worked, and people wrote books in it, and through this, you developed a really fascinatingly difficult uh, way of writing. Then, sometime around the 900s or so, by chance, two groups of people ended up creating hiragana and katakana, and these were not. I've seen videos that say like someone invented them, and that's not the case. There was no like intent; it just kind of happened. You had people developing a cursive style of writing kanji, which became more and more like illegible, is the not nice way of saying it, until the kanji were basically just like shapes. And it's very like, if you look at documents written in this time, they're very beautiful looking, but you can't even like, I can't at least make out like most of the kanji. It's very artistic. There's a lot of emphasis on form, and that led to hiragana. And at the same time, monks were working with sutras, which are supposed to be read in a certain way. There's like it's not just about what's being said; it's about saying it in the way that evokes the sounds that are holy or whatever. And they were looking at ways of annotating difficult kanji to make them more readable. And the first step was taking easier kanji that are read the same way and putting them above the difficult kanji. But the problem with that is there's not a lot of space. So they started taking pieces of those kanji, and that led to katakana. But there was no organization system, so there were plenty of redundant hiragana. There were like multiple hiragana for every sound, multiple katakana for every sound, etc. No one was doing this in a like regimented manner. And so basically, as a result of this, when we get into the 13, 14, 15, 16, hundreds, you have a bunch of Japanese people with varying degrees of literacy and varying degrees of not just scripts, but styles. So there were kanji only styles. There were kanji katakana mixes. There were kanji hiragana mixes. There were kanji katakana hiragana mixes. There were hiragana katakana mixes. There were hiragana only texts, katakana only texts. And they all existed at the same time. And the problem is we don't have access to a lot of it because what survives tends to be very formal.
Mm.
So the letters that were written by, person A on the street to person B on the street are unlikely to persist compared to a book that has been copied time and time and time again. But we have dictionaries, we have government documents, etc., and there's a huge variety of styles. Which book is it? This book right here, called just
Nihon.
Nihongo no Rekishi, is not an easy read, but it has pictures of just Japanese writing throughout thousands, not that, yeah, hundreds, over 1,000 years. And it's very interesting just to look through the variety of it. And no one really saw this as a problem because this is a period where around the world, like having all of your citizens be literate was not considered to be like a thing that you strived for. But eventually, especially with the influence of, as I mentioned, that kind of Western nationalism, like we are a nation, we have a language kind of form that got brought into Japan. A lot of the early Japanese linguists went abroad and came back with this kind of belief system. Around the 1800s, you started to see a real push for a singular form of Japanese that reflected the spoken language. One similar thing of like all the pre 1800s, not all, but the vast majority of the writing did not reflect how people spoke. So this resulted in a movement called the Genbun Ichi movement, or the unification of speech and writing. And there were a number of progresses and setbacks that happened. Initially, for instance, newspapers were a big push for having a standardized system. But if you look at early newspapers, it's kanji katakana mixes. So hiragana would have been the marked script in that case. And it culminated in debates, et cetera. But then finally, and there were steps made and then steps back. But finally, after World War II, the reformists had enough political leverage, being supported by the American occupation forces, to actually do the reforms that they wanted mostly, and that resulted in the system we have now. So that's how we got there. It was a lot of chance, a lot of play, a lot of experimentation, and a lot of people writing things that most people in the country couldn't read without training. People wrote for people that had the same style as them. But it got us to where we are. And a lot of people critique the Japanese writing system for being overly complex, but it's nowhere near as complex as it used to be. And I think they've actually done a pretty good job at making something that works for the Japanese language. When you describe it in the abstract, the current system sounds, kind of horrible. But Japan has a huge literacy rate. They have a massive publication, industry.
Hmm.
They read a lot and is doing a good job. I think it's right now in a current place. So the final part of that question was, do I see the death of kanji? And the answer is absolutely no. I see a decrease in people's ability to handwrite kanji, just like there's a decrease in people's ability to handwrite or spell words. Like if it wasn't for the little squiggly red line in Microsoft Word, I probably couldn't write English anymore. But actually, I think kanji literacy is going up. And that's because you've seen words like kirei, which used to only be written in katakana, being written in kanji again. Not because
Oh.
the government said, hey, let's increase the kanji, but because people use it in texting so much that people are familiar with it, even if maybe they're a bit hesitant to write it, right? Because of the difficulty. So I think the future of kanji is bright, assuming as long as Japan exists, basically. It's the chance to get rid of kanji was right after World War II. That was the last chance. And I don't think they should have done it. And I'm glad they didn't. And they didn't. And now it's too late. If you got rid of kanji now, you'd be cutting. Yeah, it just is. You'd
Yeah.
be cutting. It's not like a small spelling reform. You'd be cutting off every Japanese person from not only like the history of Japanese writing, which you know, kind of has happened, but all the updates to those books, like The Tale of Genji and in modern writing standards, etc., you'd be cutting them off from everything that's been written on the Japanese internet for decades now.
Hmm.
All modern literature and writing. The benefits aren't there. The claims that were quite common in the past, especially from Western linguists, that Japanese people were like harming the future of the country by spending all this time memorizing characters or wasting their time learning these characters when they could be learning other things. Those have been proven false. There's the big one that came up was the invention of the computer. That was the next time people say, "Oh, Japan's not going to survive the invention of the computer, or the invention of the typewriter," and there were struggles. It took some work to get it working, but now it hasn't happened. So I don't predict any death of kanji. I don't see it happening. I see more kanji being used, to be honest, than in the past. But I do predict the average Japanese person's ability to handwrite kanji will decrease significantly, and continue to. Yeah.
Next question. So, does stroke order really matter?
Depends on what you mean by matter. Aesthetically, it depends on how well you can write. If you're very, very good at uh like just writing, if you have good handwriting, if you're very artistic, I'm sure you can make very nice looking kanji regardless of the stroke order. But I do think it's important. And I say this as someone who has really disgustingly bad handwriting in every language. Like embarrassingly, like literally embarrassing English handwriting and pretty pathetic Japanese handwriting as well, but actually maybe better than my English handwriting. The two reasons that you really need to pay attention to stroke order in Japanese are, ironically, one, more than ever, uh, it's actually like technology has made it more important because the best Japanese dictionaries will allow you to write the kanji, right? If you pay for a really good Japanese dictionary, a feature we'll have is that you can write the kanji rather than looking it up by radicals. How do those systems figure out what kanji you're writing? Stroke order. So
Um,
I didn't pay attention to stroke order very much when I was learning Japanese because we don't test it in class. Like there's just not enough time, and it's not as important. It's like no one, making that part of a grade is kind of silly. So I didn't pay attention to it, and then I had to relearn it all so I could use my dictionaries right.
oh.
Uh, so that was silly, and I wish I just believed the teacher a bit more. And secondly, I saw a video, a random like YouTube video on it, on like why stroke order is important, and they brought out the old chestnuts of like it looks prettier. It's like, I don't know about that. Or like it helps you memorize it. I'm like, I don't know if I believe that. But they did mention that when you follow the stroke order, you learn the radicals better and you learn what parts of kanji are. And I did agree with that. And they were pointing out like when you draw a box in Japanese, right? You have the 1, 2, 3
Hmm.
system. If you just draw a square, like again, if your handwriting is good enough, I think you could pass it off without people noticing your stroke order is messed up. But there is value in understanding that, like, okay, this is the box part, right? Or like if you follow the stroke, you're like, oh, this is this part. And you can actually break the kanji into their pieces that form them. And that does help understand what's going on. It helps like, oh, this is a phonetic element that I see. This is how it looks, right? That part is beneficial. So I don't think it's so important that like it should suddenly be tested in Japanese classes or anything like that. But I would say that it's worth following. Yes, like every book mentions it. There's always pictures of it. Just do it. It's-
For the dictionary alone, that is really important because when I was learning Japanese, we didn't have that kind of thing where you could just write in the stroke order. That's pretty amazing. Next question. Why is tiger Tora, but white tiger is White tiger?
I don't know. I don't know the specific answer to that question, but like, there's no reason. It's like, why is Blackboard Kokoban and why is whiteboard white the bold? I'm guessing. My guess is that tiger is an older word, so it's been in the Japanese language longer, so they had their own native term for it, and maybe they didn't have a word for white tigers. I don't know. Like, I don't know when the first Japanese person saw a white tiger. I don't know where white tigers exist naturally in the world. And there might have been like shiro or shiratora as a word. I have no idea. I don't know that. Uh, but it might have been that white tigers were introduced as like a concept, and people thought it would be flashy to use the katakana version. So who knows? Uh, but generally, when you have a contrast, like for blackboard, whiteboard, the difference is that blackboards have been around since before World War II, and
Mhm.
whiteboards are a more recent invention. So while Hakuban would have been fine, they decided not to because it does sound like a bit older, I guess, and it's a there's not the resistance to borrowing words as much as there were at certain periods of Japanese history. So something like that. Yeah. You can just say Shiroi Hora, I guess, is that still means a white tiger. You can do that.
Mhm. Why is sumimasen? Excuse me, if that's not the literal translation of the word, how did sumimasen come to mean excuse me?
I should know this and I don't. That's more of a historical thing. So I believe sumimasen comes from like sumus, like to,
Yes.
like to complete, to finish. Um, my guess has always been the way that I learned it, I kind of try to memorize it in my brain was just like, if it does not complete, then you need to apologize for it.
Interesting.
Like
Okay.
it's like not banana. It's like if you don't do it, it will not become. Like if I don't
Uh-huh.
eat, it will not become. And like, well, then I better eat, right? So it means have to. That's just my guess. I do enjoy that kind of literal translation thing to kind of memorize why something is the way it is. But I don't actually know the specific history of Sumimasen, so my apologies. But I'm guessing it comes from the idea like, um, you know, it's a longer phrase where it's like I did something and it does not, finish, and therefore I'm apologizing for it, and then it kind of adopted that sort of meaning. Is just yeah, my guess.
I guess like sayonara is like sayonara. Is it sayonara nakereba? No, it's sayonara.
Yeah,
Sayonara
like it's
longer.
sayonara if it is that way, right?
Yeah.
Sayonara. And like konnichiwa is from like, as for today. It was a longer phrase like I hope you were doing well kind of stuff, and then just got cut down.
Like
Yeah, these
goodbye. Like goodbye. Very
is that
similar.
was that longer?
God be with you. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there
And
you
so they
go.
just smashed it all together eventually. Like, all right, goodbye.
Oh, I just assumed it was like because, you didn't want the bye to be bad, right? So have a good bye instead of a
No, it was
mediocre bye.
may God be with you, and then it just got
Oh,
truncated eventually over time, and so goodbye, and then now bye. People just say bye. That's
right.
it, right?
Okay, it's good to know because like when I hear things like that, I often assume that they're like fake, like there's all these
Some
fake
of them,
etymologies of like
some fake
yeah.
etymologies are
But
indeed
that
just
one's real.
folk tales.
Okay.
That one is
Okay.
real, yeah,
Yeah, I
exactly.
don't know anything about English. It's not my
Here's a good dad joke question for you. How many moshiwakes makes a gomewaku wo okake shite moshiwake gozaimasen?
five.
Exactly. I love that video you did. We were talking about things that you need to take with you to Japan, and one of them is the moshiwakis, and you have
Yeah, you
to.
gotta have emotional thing. Yeah.
How
Otherwise
many
then you're
should
like,
you pack though?
I mean, as long as you have one, just don't use it up. Just show it off and then put it back as long as you still have it.
I did have to use one when I was in Japan.
Hmm.
I
And you can
had
be like,
to.
Mochiwaki arimasu, and everyone will be like, yeah, okay. Oh, then, all right. If there's a reason for it, then that's fine.
This one is more of a serious question. How do you
Mhm.
know when to use the particle no for versus adjective compounds? Like, for example, something like enaga dango versus byoki no hi. How do you know when to use the no particle when for I think he wants to turn a noun into an adjective or either make adjective compounds.
Oh, so like akaino versus like watashino?
I think it's that they're so something so when you say a sick person, you say
Yeah.
byoki no hi instead of sick person. You say byoki no
Yoki no hito,
hi.
yeah. Mm.
So
And
why
what's the
wouldn't
other?
it?
What's the other?
So for example, enaga dango? Why wouldn't you write enaga no dango instead of just putting them together as an adjective compound?
Enaga dango. Is that a type of dango? I'm not familiar
Uh,
with that.
an enaga dango is the enaga is the little fluffy mushy mushy bird that sits on
Oh.
the thing, and so a colloquial phrase for when they sit on that wire is enaga dango. But yeah, so it's
Okay.
just a little fluffy thing. So for example, with the I think byoki no hi instead of just byoki hi, a sick person. Why do you have to put the
Sick
no
day.
particle there?
Yeah. So because is the actual answer. Those birds are cute. I didn't know that. But basically, like when you in Japanese, when you have two things you could connect with no, if they are like so commonly connected that they get treated as like their own word, then no can get removed. So, for instance, like raw meat is nama no niku, right?
Mhm.
But prosciutto is just namahamu. Whereas nama no hamu sounds like something that you should not eat, right?
Okay.
Nama creamu is fresh cream because it's just the name of the thing. So as silly as it sounds, the name of those birds on the branch doesn't need no. Indeed, if you attach no there, I think you get the vibe of like dongo that are owned by the bird, right?
Okay.
It's not its own distinct word. It becomes a possessive thing there. So in those cases, like in nama no niku, it's not possessive. It's not meat that's owned by raw. It's the Japanese use of nouns like we use adjectives in English, right? Just like, Nihon no kuruma or something.
Mm.
It's not Japan's car usually. I'm sure Japan owns a few cars, but it's usually a Japanese car in English using an adjective. So Japanese does that, but when they want to make something very clear as its own distinct entity, they will not have a no. And you'll see this, a very common example, right, is Tokyo no Daigaku is any or all universities in Tokyo, whereas Tokyo Daigaku is the University of Tokyo because it's like a
Ah,
distinct name, it's an entity there. So that would be what's going on with those. But if the birds, the enagas, go and buy some dango, that would be enaga no dango because they would be dango owned by the birds, rather than what is being described by that term, which is like a concept in a way.
okay. Next question. How did each become hitotsu and so on? Why are Japanese counters so difficult?
Backwards, backwards. So Ichi didn't become Hitotsu. Hitotsu became Ichi because both Japanese and Korean have two counting systems. One is native and one is borrowed from Chinese. The tsus, Hitotsu, Futatsu, Mitsu, etc., is related to the native Japanese counting system, which was used to count everything. I wrote this information actually in a blog article, I think a few years ago, because there's no reason for me to keep it in my head, but I did want to know it. But there are ways to count above, like right now you don't count, the generic counter is not used above 10, right? You get to toll and you're done. You don't do like, Juitotsu or anything like that. Uh, but there used to be ways to count, obviously, above 10 without the Chinese system. But the influence of China on Japan, Japanese, what we now call, Korean, has been massive, and that involves the introduction of extra counting systems. Um, so basically, Japan now has this kind of uh, everything's a collective noun style counting system.
Mhm.
Like in English, you can't say like you can say three waters, but that's a colloquialism to mean three glasses of water at a restaurant. But you can't be like, there are, 5 million water in that lake. You can't say that. You
Yeah.
can't say one pant, even though you should. It has to be a pair of pants, right? Like you are wearing one glass, I guess, but we have to say one pair of glasses. Everything works like that in Japanese, right? Everything is like a sheet of paper, a ream of paper. And that's basically the influence of Chinese. That system existed in Chinese. Why did that system exist in Chinese? Who knows? The better question is why doesn't it exist in English, right? Who knows? They felt they needed it. And when Chinese influenced Japanese, which at the time that China first made contact with Japan, the in terms of which technological development, etc., it was very much, it's never 100% one way, but it was very much China to Japan, very much so. And so they brought in the counting system, and that influenced how Japanese people count things. But there was a native system, and the reason why you have sneaky things like hitotsu, hitori, right? Still,
Hmm.
not ichinin,
Right.
futari instead of ninin. Those are the legacy of the native Japanese counting system rather than the Chinese one. So it's the opposite direction. Ichi came later. Ichi is the onyomi.
Next question. How did the kanji for bin or ben, as in takyubin and yubin kyoku and benjo, get to mean
Hmm.
male and poop?
I don't know. It's a good question. I'll look that up, and I have a series on my blog of things I learned about Japanese recently, and I'll pop that into the one I'm working on right now because I don't know the answer to that.
Ooh,
It's a good
good
question.
question.
Yeah.
I think it was Metro Classic recently covered that, so a few people have been wondering because even he doesn't know. He's like, I don't know how this kanji came to mean both male and poop. No idea.
I
Um,
can have a quick look, see if I can find it in like 2 seconds. So the first website I go to look up just any information on a character's history is Wiktionary of all things. And it's not because you trust it, but because it tends to have uh, something. It doesn't for this. So that means that I'm guessing there's not an easy explanation here. And when I eventually find the answer to this, which I promise whoever asked that question, I will look into it. I'm interested now too. The answer is going to be we don't know, but here are a bunch of major theories, which tends to be the case. But I don't know off the top of my head. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Now
But it
you
does
have,
exist in Chinese too. I did find that out. So Chinese people also have this double use.
and they don't know either why it's both male
Yeah.
and poop.
Well, I don't know if they don't know, but Wiktionary doesn't have an explanation. So looking up any further would make this podcast incredibly dull. So we'll have to put a pin in that one.
Next question. Why is gozaimasu always used for keigo, and what does it actually mean?
Always used for keigo. It's always used for keigo because Japanese people have decided it's polite, or it's a keigo word. So there you go. What does it mean? I guess it means is MR, right? De gozaimasu, des. It's a variant of des. Um, that's a really hard question to answer. Like it doesn't mean much. Its meaning is social. Japanese people have agreed more or less silently that this is well, no, it's not silent. There's whole books about how to be polite. So it's very loudly, actually. They've agreed very loudly that
Loudly, but in small voices.
yeah, loudly, but without like a coordinated, review body, that this is a polite term, so it is. There have been a few. I'm actually reading a book right now that's on just the history of Sasete Itadaku as a form. It is an interesting book, but after a few hundred pages, it is a lot to keep reading about the same grammar point. That said, what I found fascinating of it is it does have a history of Japanese giving and receiving verbs, which is
Hmm.
linked to the history of politeness in Japanese. And basically it's a constant flux. Like you have these terms that are used in that were polite that are not anymore. Like ageru used to be just a polite, like, but it started being used in outside of these contexts and it became normal. So they had to develop sashiageru as like the polite version. And these complexities that appear, it's this kind of treadmill of things that were polite becoming impolite, or things that were, being elevated and new words being invented. And one big influence on what we now understand as polite kind of Japanese is when the Japanese moved the capital to Tokyo, Edo, and had the system of people coming from around. There were like, if you were the lord of an area, you had to come and spend time there. And people brought their dialects in and had to kind of make a hodgepodge new style that was, formal and polite. And it involved all these changes. Some are actually said to come from like the red light districts, even. And you have like, this is where des as like a polite ending came from. This is why we can do things like naides
Hmm.
Janaides, because it was Arimasen, and then they got shortened to Janai because Nai is the shortening of Arimasen, and then people are like, oh, I got to make that polite again, so I'll just slap this des thing that people are saying onto it, uh, which is weird because it's like is being attached to a negative, it's all the stuff that happened, and so Gazaimas is just part of that. Like it was not initially a nationwide feature, but it got established as a polite ending, and now it just kind of exists as that. It's like the O in things like osushi or ocha, right? That doesn't actually have like real meaning, but it was developed by linguistically influential people, specifically, Heian period, etc., courtesans. It was part of like Nyobo Kotoba, or the speech of higher class women. And now we kind of have to do it, even though like the word is cha, right? It's not ocha, it's cha. In a dictionary, it's cha. But if you say like cha, you sound like a bore. You sound like a rude, like in a Japanese movie or something, when they want to show that like the husband or the boss is misogynistic or jerk, they'll be like cha, instead of just yelling it out. So you have to have the not to be polite, but to be normal. Whereas it was invented as kind of a ooh, look how super, special we are. And so it's just part of that change. But does it really mean anything? Not really, but it has social meaning, and that's what's important for it. Yeah.
Where did the word ninja come from if in Japanese the word is shinobi no mono?
Um, I don't know the exact history of it, but there's a lot of Japanese words that take, the Japanese two words written in Japanese and jam them together. It's like where did kaisui come from? If you have umi no mizu, there you go. You have shinobu, and you have mono, although I guess in it's hito, different kanji, but slap them together and you have a new word.
I
Yeah, I
think
don't
that
know when that happened.
yeah, yeah, I think because there's always, argument over like, oh, did ninjas actually exist? That word
Hmm.
wasn't used that much in history. Did they actually, were the Iga actually ninjas and all that kind of thing? So there is that question, especially since a lot of the imagery that we have about shinobi or ninjas, a lot of it
Mm.
comes from woodblock prints and kabuki and all that kind of thing. Whereas in history, it didn't really happen that way. So there's
Oh yeah,
always, yeah,
the image of ninja in like the
the black
black with the
pajamas.
like that's all as far as I'm aware, very ahistorical. But
Yeah.
as of where the word came from, I mean it's a person who it's a hito who's shinobus, right? So it's a ninja. Like that's a pretty expected word to be produced once you have people that shinobu as a job, you know.
We need more Japanglish and all this. I like ninja Shinobus.
It is. It's a hito who shinobus.
That's
So
so good. I love it so much. Can you talk a bit about the theme song culture in Japan? Why are Japanese jingles made with such odd and strange lyrics? And the person says like the Sakana song, the Don Quixote song, the Otobashi camera song, etc.
I'm not the right person to ask for that. That's kind of out. But I would say I don't find any of those to be odd. I don't find them any weirder than English jingles, you know. Like with pepper, the gum, we don't have, I mean, the fact that jingle culture still exists in Japan is a bit interesting to me. Like it's kind of dead-ish in my experience. And like I don't see as many as I did growing up.
Mhm.
But there were plenty of jingles that existed and were weird and, were meant to make you hum about, gum and stuff like that. So I don't, jingles are in general, like the purpose of a jingle is to get it stuck in your head. So if it's stuck in your head, then it's not a weird jingle, it's a very effective jingle. And if like Don Quixote is goes viral for their jingle all the time, so I would say that's not a weird jingle, that's an extremely good jingle. It is, they've done a very excellent job making it in your brain. So it's the distilled essence of what a jingle should be, I would say.
I'm still
But
glad they
yeah.
have it. I heard today, however, that the train jingles on the JR line, I heard that they're considering getting rid of them. Uh,
Oh,
I know. I was so
that's sad.
upset because I love them and they're all so
Hmm.
unique and interesting, but apparently it's because they're cutting back on personnel and those from what I understand, those jingles are not programmed. They're actually they have to be done by either the conductors or the people that run trains. So in order to cut back on
Um,
personnel, they're trying to get rid of. I sincerely hope they reconsider that because the jingles are part of what makes the JR line great. And they've been
yeah, I
around for a
mean,
long time.
it's nice to have some fun sounds.
Ah,
I don't mind it. Like,
I
yeah.
completely agree. Well,
But
you're also a music man, so I know you'd be very sad if they would disappear.
yeah,
What
I would say that just for whoever asked that question, I'm not trying to like, don't feel bad, but try to avoid anything that's like, why is this weird thing? There's very little that's actually weird. The fact that it's different or unexpected doesn't make it weird. And looking at things, especially there's a lot of weird Japan stuff, and I don't enjoy the weird Japan discourse. It's very easy to look at something that's outside of what your norm is and find it weird, but it's usually more effective to think maybe my norm is actually what's weird. Because for Japanese people, these aren't weird. And if you've grown up with jingles your entire life and you get into advertising, you'll probably try to make a jingle.
they're
I
the
think the more
smart
interesting
ones.
question is why did the English speaking world often abandon jingles? That to me is the actual question. What causes we all had jingles. Where did they go? We know why jingles are good. They sell things that get stuck in your brain. So why don't we have them anymore? That would be the weird thing to me, is the abandonment of the jingle.
I think you're right because if you think about it, when we were younger, this is not monetized. So if I sing the Coke song, nobody cares. But we used to have a Coca-Cola song, and now Coca-Cola has abandoned that in favor of really horrible, Uncanny Valley AI ads,
Hmm.
which are horrible, and they have to cut them down because they're so horrific. So I
I
would
mean, I
much
still remember
rather.
the double mint and the Folgers
Yeah,
jingles. Best
exactly.
part of waking up is Folgers in
Folgers
your
in
cup.
your cup. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's stuck in my head 30 plus years later. So that's return on investment as far as advertising goes. I don't remember any advertisements I've seen in the last 3 years, but I will die with the Folgers jingle in my brain. So there you go. Like, yeah.
It's true. I mean, and everybody who comes out of Don Quixote, you can't come out of there without going don don don
Yeah.
Don Quixote. And now they have a new one with was it with Bruno Mars? So apparently
Oh
he's
my God, what?
Oh yes. Oh, you didn't know this? Okay,
No, I
so
did not know that there was a Bruno
as
Mars
of, I would
documentary.
say, as of about 3 months ago, so this was not really widely advertised. And so people who were visiting Japan suddenly saw a man with a bucket hat dancing with four girls who looked, I think they might be Blackpink. I'm not sure. I think they are. I'm not too much
Mhm.
into Korean pop, so I don't know. But people saw this and they went, "Is that Bruno Mars?" And it's him s- dancing with four girls with Don Pen, the mascot of Don Quixote, and
Oh.
he's doing, and the his new jingle is Donkey Ikuyo, and he just that's it, that's the whole song, but it goes on for 2 minutes of him just having a grand old time around Don Quixote. Going Donkey Ikuyo with these four girls, and he's just having a ripping time. And this suddenly just went viral because people thought, why wasn't this advertised all over the world? It's Bruno Mars singing a Don Quixote song. So, and nobody knows why he decided to do this and then just not tell anybody. So, if I'm not mistaken, I think he's from Hawaii or grew up on Honolulu. And so some people have theorized, oh, well, maybe he grew up with the store because there is one in Hawaii because of the large Japanese population. So maybe he did it because he grew up with the brand and he knows the brand. But yeah, so you can now find it in the club in Don Quixote is Bruno Mars dancing to a techno song.
That's
So
excellent. Yeah.
yeah, so if you look up the video, you'll see it's all over YouTube. But yeah, I just thought it was the weirdest thing. When I was just in Japan, they have televisions with him on it singing a brand new song for his song. Um,
I'm unfortunately, I haven't been to Japan, unfortunately, in far too many years, for a number of reasons. I'm hoping to change that soon, but yeah, I have to kind of keep up with the stuff through the internet and through the the work I'm doing there. So do miss some of these big changes. Like if I was there and all of a sudden heard a new Don Quixote song, I might have a bit of a shock because the one I'm used to is but you do got to update. Saying you gotta keep the jingles fresh. And if you get someone as big as Bruno Mars to do it, then you'd think they'd be silly not to jump on that opportunity.
oh yeah, absolutely. Especially if he just did it and didn't advertise it. Of course you're going to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. But yeah, when you do go, you know what I would love? I would love to for you to do a series of Dr. Wes in Japan and learning new slang off the streets. I would love to see you in like Amerikamura getting like brand new slang as it's like fresh off the pavement
That would
from
be
young,
cool. I don't do street interviews, but
not necessarily
I mean,
interviews,
that's
just
a
asking the
asking.
kids around,
I might need to get research ethics on that because I have responsibilities. But that'd be kind of interesting. I never thought about that.
I'd love that if you could do that
Okay,
on your
think
if you're
about it.
willing to stomach Osaka in the summer of you hanging out in Amerikamura and
Oh,
asking the Flash kids there what the new word on the street is, like what their brand new slang terms are. I think that would be pretty cool. I would definitely watch that series 100%.
that's interesting.
I will fund it.
You'll fund it.
Again, Kickstarter. Dr. West goes to Japan to find the new words on the street. We have
Getting
only a
comedians
few
to go to Japan would be a dream, but that hasn't happened yet.
soon. We only have two questions left,
Okay.
and then I want to ask you about your own podcast. So, what does yappari mean, and why is it so difficult to translate?
Yup Party is like that's the way it is, and I thought it would be that way. Like I guess is a way to say it. Like a lot of words, it's contextual, but it's like as expected, as I expected, as I thought, or I figured it would go that way, and it did. It is, that kind of thing. Why is it hard to translate? Some words are just harder to translate than others. It's a
How does
boring
it
answer, but
differ then from Sasuga?
oh God, that's a question, isn't it? Sasuga, I'm speaking. There's some things I've said in this interview which I say authoritatively, and there's other things that have to say based on just my vibes. And this is more of a vibes one. Is that Sasuga generally is complimentary?
Hmm.
Like when someone does something, when someone, I I see Sasuga mostly used when somebody does something that shows off their talents in a way that you find reliable and you want to compliment them for that. Like somebody makes someone's really good at presenting and they give a good presentation, and afterwards you go like Sasuga, you presented well. Um, Yapari often has more of a kind of like negative-ish vibe to it. I wouldn't say absolute on either of these, but like if you kind of figure that somebody is gonna bail on you, and then you all get together and the person is actually bailed, that would more be like Yapari, instead of like assassin. Um, Whereas, if yeah, they'd be the opposite for so that's kind of my vibe on those. I'm not super confident in breaking them down, and I wouldn't say there's like 100% of a wall between them, but something like that.
I know you've probably seen the Detroit Metal City movie, which is one of the greatest movies of all time.
I've
And
not seen it.
as a metal fan and as a
Yeah.
Japanese speaker, oh my God, oh no. So there, okay, so there's a moment where if you don't know, if you've never read DMC,
Mm,
Detroit Metal City, either the manga or if you see not seen the movie or the anime, it's about a young pop star, very like happy
mm,
pop star who actually gets into singing death metal and really
mm.
brutal death metal, and he does so because it makes money, whereas his pop career is not going very well. So
Okay, so very the opposite of the real world. Yeah, I got it.
yes, exactly, yes. So his death metal, he becomes this death metal god called Krauser, and he's got his own band, and they're
Mhm.
amazing. And in the movie, he has a battle of the bands with Jack, who is really Gene Simmons. And so of course Marty Friedman is there with him also, and
Mm.
they play this absolutely ripping set where they play a song called "Fuckingham Palace," which is very famous. And so as after they play, the crazy manager, she's standing there with her cigarette, and she goes, "Ah, Saska Jack."
Yeah. So well done. Yeah. Well done as expected. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yapari I
exactly.
don't think would work in that situation for sure.
I'm so surprised you've not seen Detroit Metal City. That's
I assumed it
amazing.
was hair metal stuff, and I really don't like hair metal, so I just
No,
kind of wrote it
not at
off.
all. Not at all. It's very much he sings about death and killing, and he's got death metal vocals and growls and things
Okay.
like that. So actually, why don't you tell us, please, about Lingua Brutalica?
Oh yeah, was there one more question or should
Well, I think you've answered some of them because one of them was about kanji,
Oh, okay.
and about radicals, and then another one was just asking why is it that Butsu is both Buddha and stolen goods?
That's different kanji, right?
Yeah, I think they're different kanji,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
exactly same pronunciation.
Okay. I don't want to leave that person's question, that poor person who asked the question handed. So a different kanji. So Butsu as in the kanji for Buddha, and then the Butsu stolen goods comes from a reading of thing, right? So it's a thing, and a lot of Japanese like thieves' argot, yakuza words, come from like taking normally you call it like a mono, right? A
Hmm.
thing, but giving it the onyomi and then switching it to katakana is just like a thing that happens. Like yaku from kusuri, right? Reading it as yaku, which you're not supposed to do, and that's drugs. That's just like
Uh,
it's like a Cockney rhyming slang, thieves argot style thing. So they have no relationship to each other. They just happen to sound the same. But that's where Butsu comes from is the one of the two onyomis of mono.
is
Yeah.
Butsu related to Yatsu?
No, Yatsu is just a third person pronoun that has kind of devolved into a vague term.
Like
Yeah.
Konoyasu, that guy over there, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because it has Yatsu has its own kanji, it has its own history. Like no, the pronouns in Japanese are famously unstable, and Yatsu is on the losing side of the you know
Aw.
of the social capital war of the pronouns compared to karera, etc. Anokata, things like that.
So
Yeah. Okay, so
that is
yeah,
definitely all the questions. So please tell us about Lingua
okay.
Brutalica.
Lingua Brutalica. Lingua Brutalica is a weird little side note that I'm not very proud of, but in terms of like time investment to fame or response is probably the worst of what I do. Um,
I like it.
so we've had the honor, and I shouldn't like I'm not trying to disparage it. We've had the honor of talking. I'm a big fan of extreme metal. I always have been. Not always. I have been for at least around 20 years. And we've had the honor of speaking to so many like people in the scene, but it's a huge amount. We have no real, we have no connections, no sponsorship. We're not on, Metal Hammer, it's like a mailing list or anything like that, or Metal Blades mailing list. But we just blind email people who are the singers or lyricists of metal bands. And now 65, well, 67, we've released 65 episodes, but 67 of them have been kind enough to sit down with us and chat. And that includes some people, that are new and just doing cool stuff, to some people that I've been listening to for decades that have been kind enough to take an hour or two and chat with me and my co-host Jess about how they approach the idea of writing metal lyrics, like why they make the decisions they do. This came about because my co-host Jess Crook is works at the University of Western Australia, and she is a sociolinguist of Indonesian and Chinese and a lot of things. Great researcher, great person, big fan. And we worked together on an article on script play by a Japanese band named Gotsu and the Taiwanese band Chthonic, who are much more, quite famous. Probably one of the most famous bands out of Asia, I'd say, in the scene. Um, and we got it published in a journal that both of us had written independent articles to that have been rejected. So we're like, oh, this has legs. Like, it was very based on my interest in the Japanese writing system and a writing system research, which was initial. But we thought, okay, there's something here. We the actual point of this article is something bigger, and it's communicating with linguistic dialogues that are of worldwide interest rather than just our little, our favorite areas. So we expanded the project into a book-length project, and that book is coming out in October via University of Hawaii Press. It's called Peripheral Linguistic Brutality, Metal Languaging in the Asia Pacific. And we're very proud of that and very excited to have more details out when it gets closer to coming out. But that is going to investigate that's a formal research study, right? It's very that ivory tower kind of stuff. We wrote it as accessibly as possible. It's coming out from Hawaii Press, as I mentioned, which is on the more affordable side, but there are chapters that use big multisyllabic words, and it's full of citations and references, and it is an academic project. And those interviews were done with people in their native languages, which make it less accessible. But we thought, like, why don't we? Jess has been someone that throughout my career has been encouraging and really helping me figure out options for more connecting research to the broader world. She's the one that, for instance, said, "Hey, TikTok's pretty fun. You should check it out." Uh, and so we thought, like, why don't we do these interviews that we're doing for our research project with English speakers and just see what happens and put it out in the world and see what happens. And we did that, and we never thought it would last, really, to be honest, but it has, as I mentioned. And again, like, it's not a big thing. It's some of our episodes have gotten attention. So we've been cited in actual academic research, like our interviews have been cited, which is really cool to see. And the people that like it really like it, but it's super niche. Like, it's the sociolinguistics of death metal, and that's taking two small audiences and shrinking them even smaller. There are lots of people that love death metal and don't pay attention to lyrics at all, and there's a lot of linguists that don't listen to death metal. So it's very, very specific. But it's a fun little
I
thing.
fit that demographic.
Yeah, you fit the demographic. Every once in a while, someone's a fan. And we've really appreciated, more than anything, we've appreciated that after a lot of the interviews, like the people we interviewed say, I never get to talk about this stuff. And we bring, like, one of the reasons, a selfish reason that I've kept doing it is that it is a way to improve my interview skills, which is doing interviews is something I do in my formal research projects. So getting better at that and developing research questions, analyzing language. Like, we spend the time to prep an interview is massive. And that's why it's a huge, like, time investment versus, like, I spend way more time preparing some of the interview questions than I do for the TikTok videos, but the TikTok videos get tens of thousands, sometimes more attention.
That's how it always
But
is.
yeah, it's all it is. Yeah, but it's a fun little thing. And we have been able to feature some Japanese artists on there. We had Psy which is an incredible long running band. We had Himari, a Japanese kind of metal idol, who has since then, not because of us, with no relation to us, exploded in her own right. Like she has massive followings online these days. She's been doing really, really great, and it was delightful to sit down with her. And her English is like apparently getting quite good. But at the time, her manager was there, and we did like a translation thing. But getting to highlight, linking it to the Japanese audience, getting to highlight those Japanese bands is something that's really good. We've had bands from China. We've had some bands from like Italy. Whenever we can get like a non-English speaking, or at least non-native English speaking group on, that's always a lot of fun. And yeah, if you like it, if you're interested, check it out. It's on Spotify, it's on Podbean. It's super, super deep dives, but if you want to hear people that are very, very passionate about language talk about how they use language, I think that's why we're really proud of it. We've sat down with people and asked them questions that they've given us these really authentic answers that involve some cases like decades of thought. And yeah, it's that part is amazing. I very much appreciate all the time that people have taken to join our interviews and answer our questions. And yeah, if you're a fan of metal, I guess give that a shot. Yeah, it's out there. It
I
do.
I hope I really one I want people to listen to Lingua Brutalica more, but I would love if like we could do something together. It's kind of like a musical linguistics project just to bring it in, just to see if maybe like we could write like a metal song together and try to figure out how we could
Oh God.
do like Japanglish in a Japanglish metal death metal song. That would be so amazing. I would love that so much. Also, I mean, whenever I hear people saying things like, "Oh, when you get to be in your 40s like we are, and you hear people go, "Oh, music's not that interesting these days," you go, "Are you listening to stuff from Asia?" Because I find that, where maybe sometimes things in the popular North American market might stagnate, although there's some great metal in Canada. Thank you very much. And it obviously there's great metal in Europe, but really nowadays like the especially the Japanese metal scene is now really getting a kind of, I know that there are artists like Hyde and Gacto who have tried for ages to permeate the North American market, whereas now you have bands like Nemophila and
Hmm.
even with Hanabiye just exploding all over the place. I think also
Hmm.
obviously everything people know baby metal, and even though they're not really, more like mellow death, they're not pure death metal, but there's th that market, especially like for Asian death metal now, is just exploding because people are on YouTube, they're online, they're discovering it themselves. It wasn't like in them days where I remember in the early 2000s, we used to have to go to like a bootleg Asian store to buy
Yeah.
a physical CD that was bootlegged off another CD just so we could get like it was like a demo disc for Asian rock and metal bands, and that's how we would be able to listen to it. Whereas nowadays, you just, playlist on Spotify or YouTube,
Yeah.
and suddenly
It's
you
much
get,
easier to find stuff.
yeah.
I think we're actually like these last few years I don't know if I missed it or I've just been too busy. I haven't heard so much, but like I think 2020 to like 2023-ish or so for me, even including America and the West, I was sort of a golden age for death metal in my opinion, and revival. There's been so many good stuff. And yeah, Asia is very, very exciting. There's a lot of like people say music was better, but they're just not paying attention to what's coming out. There's a lot of innovative stuff. Like when you get to our age, you get nostalgia for the stuff you listened to in the past, where younger people are more looking for the new stuff that's coming out. So there's a difference between there's nothing good coming out, and I'm not
I'm not vibing with
going to the
what's
places
out.
where the good stuff
Yeah.
goes. But yeah, it's music continues to evolve. Um, I don't understand most of it. I'm not a huge pop fan, especially, so I miss all that. But my students come in, and they're lots of K-pop fans, lots of fans of this and that. But and then there's fans of retro stuff too. I think it's yeah. There's issues like the TikTokification kind of songs, like trying to write a song that was viral on TikTok rather than for the thing of a song that I can rant about as an old person. But
You just
I
did
think
it in one
that
of your videos. What's that girl
yeah,
who does the
true.
food music and the
Oh, yeah, I
dances?
don't get that at all. But she doesn't care if I like whether or not I get it is irrelevant to her success. She has much more success than I do. She is putting herself out there, and all
She's
the best
vibing
to
with the
her.
kids, so she's doing
She's vibing
something
with the
right.
kids. Yeah, she's doing something right. She's putting out what they want to see. And that's great. Like, good for her. I'm not visiting her videos again now that that video's done, but I'm not her target audience, and millions of people are, you know. So awesome, cool. There's so much cool stuff out there that you just got to look for it. If you think there's no good music, you're not looking hard enough. If you think
Yeah,
there's no good metal, you're not looking hard enough. That's all there is to it.
especially when in the postmodern scene now with bands like Spirit Box and Ginger and all that kind of stuff. Even that is just amazing. A lot of their new albums are really incredible, very different than what even just 10 years ago, the kind of stuff that we had. So I mean, I understand I share your disdain of hair metal. I'm not into it either, or the glam rock. I'm just not into it.
Mm.
But my cousin was a huge fan, and so but that
Right.
gave me a gateway into European speed metal, and so that I
Mm.
find a lot more musically interesting than I really like that stuff. But
Mm.
without her going, "Oh, Michelle, listen to Bon Jovi," and I was just going, okay. But I found something, I found Stradivarius and I found a bunch of other European bands that I really liked that I thought were really cool. And
Yeah.
so there's especially with YouTube nowadays, there's no reason not to find something you like. And with that, I found you on TikTok because I was looking
Mm.
up, I again was like, oh, I should continue with my Japanese study, which is a 10-year endeavor ongoing, but you, Dr. Wes, actually did the impossible and you passed the N1 JLPT. Congratulations. That's amazing. That is, for those who
Thank.
don't know what that is, that's like the Olympics of
Uh,
Japanese language learning.
you're very kind, but you know there are many people who have passed it and are much better at Japanese than I will ever be. It's you know it's I'm not the first person who looks like me to pass it. It's a tough one, but you know uh yeah.
Did you take that certificate home and just sleep with it at night going, 10 years?
I was very proud of it when I got it. Like no question. I was especially because it was my first attempt. I said in a video recently I didn't get a good score and I didn't, but I did pass, and I was delighted. It was like I was a very different person then. My goals for Japanese were very different, and that was kind of like after that I was like, oh God, what do I do now? Like it was the end boss goal, and I was extremely just like yes, I did it, and I don't even think about it now. Like I don't mention it to anybody. Like it never comes up. Nobody asks
Are
for
you
it.
kidding me? I would have
Um,
that gilded in my wallet
I don't,
and be
I don't
like,
even know where it. I
oh
think
my
I know where it is.
God.
It's in a box somewhere. I don't even remember. Like it's just obviously like when I was applying for grad school and stuff. I highlighted that very highly. But it's just such a different time. Like my university. I mentioned it, of course, my university application for this job, but after it's never come up again. It's weird thinking about who I was and my goals for learning Japanese back then because it was very different.
No, it
But
was what
it
it was how
was a
many
good
years
challenge.
ago?
Like what did
20
I
years
pass it?
ago?
A little over, no, sorry, 20? No, a little over
Oh,
10 years
okay.
ago.
Oh, so it's not that long
So
ago.
feels like it. But yeah, if you're young and learning, not young, sorry, if you're learning Japanese and
I am
you
no, I'm not young anymore. 41 has
know,
come and gone. That
still
my
got at
young
least
ship
half
has
your life
sailed.
left, right? That's still young. If you're learning Japanese and you want a goal, and I think that having a goal is very good, the JLPT, all levels of it are a nice, solid, like benchmarking goal for sure. People say like there's no point in the JLPT 5, and from like a job perspective, they're right. Like no one's going to be like, you have JLPT N5. Wow, job, here you go. But from like a personal benchmark perspective, it can be extremely useful. And if you think like if in your brain you think if I pass N5, I will be proud of myself, then you should take N5. And same with N4, same with N3. And N2 is where you start being like, and I will put that on my resume expecting somebody to really care. Um, Actually, N2's the most important one I'd say for most like living working in Japan.
Mhm.
N1 opens up far less doors, but one of those doors is becoming a Japanese academic to some degree. So it was pretty important for what I wanted to do. But yeah, it's a good test. It's a scary test. Uh, yeah, good luck to everyone who takes it.